My name's Evelyn Vance. I am 36 years old, and I am the CEO and founder of Payback Quantitative, a high-frequency trading firm and algorithmic hedge fund. 3 weeks ago, I stood on the polished tarmac of a private aviation terminal in New York, holding a bespoke leather weekend bag I had carefully packed for a luxury trip to the Maldives. My older sister Brooke adjusted her designer sunglasses, looked at me with a perfectly practiced expression of mild inconvenience, and shrugged. "Oh, Evelyn, I completely forgot to add your name to the manifest. The jet is at maximum capacity with Derek's new investors. Just head home, grab a cab or something. I had paid $400,000 for that trip. I had chartered the Gulfstream G650. I had booked the exclusive overwater villas at the private island resort. I had arranged the Michelin-starred private chef, the yacht excursions, and the supplementary spending accounts. And my sister had never intended for me to step foot on that plane. Not because she forgot, but because she simply viewed me as the ATM that dispensed her reality. But here is what none of them knew, not Brooke, not her husband Derek, and certainly not the investors they had smuggled onto my flight. The Gulfstream was chartered under my corporate black card. The resort contract was legally bound to my signature. And the supplementary cards Brooke buys been weeping with reckless abandon for 3 years were tied directly to my personal accounts. What I did over the next 48 hours resulted in 72 missed calls, a stranded bridal party-style nightmare in the Indian Ocean, and the absolute legal liquidation of Derek's entire tech empire. Welcome back to Alpha Mom Stories, where the women in our stories always find a way to turn silence into absolute power. If this is your first time here, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. And be sure to subscribe so you never miss a story of delayed, devastating justice. To understand the mechanics of what happened at that private hangar, you have to understand the architecture of my family. I am a quantitative financial engineer. I build algorithms that analyze millions of market variables in microseconds, executing trades that shift millions of dollars before a human trader can even blink. I deal in probabilities, risk management, and the absolute unyielding truth of mathematics. My family, on the other hand, dealt exclusively in illusions. My mother, Eleanor, was a woman who worshipped at the altar of social status. To her, appearances were not just important, they were the only currency that mattered. When I was born, I was quiet, analytical, and socially disinterested. I preferred reading advanced calculus textbooks in the corner over attending country club mixers. I was a disappointment she didn't bother to hide. My sister, Brooke, was the golden child. She was vivacious, loud, and effortlessly molded herself into the perfect socialite Eleanor desired. Brooke didn't need to be smart, she just needed to be seen. While I spent my late teens programming predictive models on a salvage server in my bedroom, Brooke was maxing out my mother's credit cards on designer handbags and ski trips to Aspen. By the time I was 22, I had moved out, entirely financially independent. I went to MIT, keeping my head down, living on ramen and coding contracts. I started my first algorithmic trading fund from a cramped dorm room. By 26, I had sold my first proprietary trading software to a major investment bank for an undisclosed 8-figure sum. I used that capital to quietly found Apex Quantitative. Today, my firm manages over $12 billion in assets. My personal net worth hovers around $800 million. I own a penthouse in Manhattan with bulletproof glass and private elevator access. I own a sprawling minimalist retreat in the Swiss Alps. But to my family, I was still just boring Evelyn. I intentionally cultivated this facade. I told them I worked as a mid-level data analyst for an insurance firm. I drove a sensible 5-year-old Volvo when I visited them. I wore plain, unbranded clothing. I never corrected their assumptions, because an algorithmic trader knows that information asymmetry is the greatest advantage you can possess. If they knew how much capital I controlled, they would have consumed me like locusts. Even with the facade, the financial bleeding was constant. Brooke had married Derek, a charismatic, smooth-talking entrepreneur who ran a tech startup called Visionary Dynamics. Derek was a man who spoke entirely in buzzwords, synergy, blockchain integration, paradigm shifts, but produced nothing of actual value. His company was a house of cards, constantly needing cash infusions to maintain the illusion of success, and Eleanor, ever the enabler, would invariably come to me, crying about how Brooke and Derek were just on the verge of a breakthrough and needed a tiny, temporary loan. Over 5 years, I had quietly funneled over $800,000 into their lives. I paid for the down payment on their massive, gaudy mansion in the Hamptons. I covered the emergency medical bills for a cosmetic procedure Brooke claimed was a necessary surgery. I paid off the silent liens on Derek's leased luxury cars. I didn't do this out of love, I did it out of calculated observation. I kept a secure, encrypted ledger on my private server. Every transaction, every wire transfer, every fake invoice Derek generated to justify the cash flow, I documented it all. I was building a database of their dependency. Every dollar I gave them was a load-bearing pillar in their fake lives. A pillar that I owned and could detonate at any moment. Derek once summarized his view of me at a Thanksgiving dinner I had paid for. I was in the kitchen, nominally fetching more wine, but actually standing perfectly still in the pantry, listening. Evelyn's just sitting on her little insurance pension, Derek laughed, swirling a glass of $200 Cabernet. She's boring, she's invisible, and she has no idea how the real world works. We might as well use her savings to fund actual innovation. It's not like she's ever going to do anything spectacular with it. Brooke giggled. She's happy in her little cubicle, Derek, just let her feel useful. I stood in the pantry, my expression perfectly neutral. I didn't storm out, I didn't scream, I simply pulled out my phone, accessed my firm's server, and quietly purchased a majority share in the private debt holding company that owned the mortgage on Derek's startup headquarters. I didn't just feel useful, Brooke, I felt omnipotent. The catalyst for the final reckoning began in March. Brooke called me, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. Evie, Derek and I were talking. We feel so bad that you work so hard and never take time for yourself. We want to do a massive family vacation, the Maldives, 2 weeks at the Azura private island resort. Just you, me, Derek, Mom and the kids, a real bonding experience. I ran the calculation instantly. The Azura resort was notoriously exclusive. Villas cost upward of $10,000 a night. A 2-week stay, factoring in private aviation from New York, would easily eclipse $250,000. That sounds expensive, Brooke, I said mildly. Well, she hesitated, deploying the practiced pause. Derek's startup is going through a massive acquisition phase, so his capital is tied up in escrow. But we thought, since you have so much saved up, maybe you could front the cost. As an investment in our family. Derek will pay you back the second his Series C funding clears. It was a lie so transparent it was almost insulting. There was no Series C funding. Derek's company was hemorrhaging cash, and his board of directors was quietly preparing to oust him. But my algorithms are designed to spot anomalies and exploit them. I realized this was the perfect stress test. I wanted to see exactly how far their parasitic entitlement would stretch. All right, I said smoothly, I'll cover it, consider it a gift, I'll arrange the travel. Brooke shrieked with joy, oh my God, Evie. You're the best. Don't worry about the details, Derek's assistant will handle the bookings. Just give us your black card info, we'll make sure everything is perfect. I didn't give them my primary account. I spun up a dedicated corporate card linked to a heavily monitored escrow account. I set the limit to $500,000 and handed over the numbers. For the next 2 months I watched the charges roll in. I watched them in real time, sipping espresso in my penthouse, a faint cold smile on my lips. The private jet charter, $180, the overwater villas, $140,000, first-class commercial positioning flights for the staff, $20, $. Designer resort wear billed from boutiques in Soho, $15. But the most interesting anomaly occurred 3 weeks before departure. An additional charge of $45,000 appeared for the Azura resort. It was categorized as a premium guest edition. I ran a trace on the booking manifest. Brooke had originally told me the trip was for 5 people, Brooke, Derek, Eleanor, myself, and my niece. The updated manifest listed 8 names: Brooke, Derek, Eleanor, my niece, and 4 names I didn't recognize. Marcus Vance, a venture capitalist Derek had been desperately courting, Jillian Vance, Marcus's wife, a vapid lifestyle influencer, and 2 of Derek's frat brother business partners. My name, Evelyn Vance, had been quietly moved from the primary guest list to the waitlist standby column on the aviation manifest. They were using my money to host a luxury networking event, to save Derek's failing company, and they had literally uninvited me from my own vacation. I didn't call Brooke to yell, I didn't cancel the card immediately. In the world of high-frequency trading, you never interrupt an opponent when they are in the process of making a catastrophic miscalculation. You let them commit their capital, you let them expose their flank, and then you liquidate them. I let the weeks pass. I let Jillian, the influencer, post pre-vacation shopping hauls on her Instagram, vaguely bragging about her generous friends, who were taking her to the Maldives. I let Derek boast on LinkedIn about his upcoming executive retreat. I packed my bag. I bought a new understated linen suit. I packed a bottle of premium SPF 50 sunscreen. I went through the motions with the precision of a Swiss watch. The morning of June 14th, the day of departure. The flight was scheduled to leave Teterboro Airport at 10:00 a.m. I arrived at the private aviation terminal at 8:45 a.m. The lounge was a masterclass in quiet luxury leather sofas, complimentary champagne, panoramic views of the runway. Brooke, Derek, Eleanor, and their entourage were already there. They had taken over the entire corner of the lounge. Jillian was setting up a ring light, posing with a glass of mimosa, while Marcus, the venture capitalist, talked loudly on his phone about cryptocurrency. Derek was wearing a tailored linen suit, looking like he owned the entire airport. Brooke spotted me walking in. For a fraction of a second, genuine panic flashed across her face. She hadn't expected me to actually show up. She thought I would have gotten the hint when she deliberately avoided calling me all week. She quickly composed herself, forcing a tight, incredibly fake smile, and walked over to intercept me before I could reach the investors. "Evie," she chirped, her voice pitched half an octave too high. "What are you doing here?" "I'm here for the flight, Brooke," I said, my voice perfectly level. "The flight to the Maldives, the one I paid $400,000 for." Brooke glanced nervously over her shoulder at Jillian and Marcus. She grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the restroom hallway, out of earshot of her guests. Derek followed closely behind, his jaw set, ready to run interference. "Listen, Mom, I mean Evie," Brooke stammered, pulling a crumpled piece of paper from her Prada tote bag. "There's been a massive mix-up with the charter company. They miscalculated the weight limits for the Gulf Stream. We can only take 8 people." She handed me the paper. It was a poorly photoshopped flight manifest. It had the charter company's logo, but the font was slightly off. It listed Derek, Brooke, Eleanor, the niece, and the 4 guests. My name wasn't on it, and since Derek really needs Marcus and Jillian there for this acquisition deal, we had to make a tough call, Brooke continued, rushing her words, refusing to make eye contact. "I'm so sorry, but I forgot to tell you that your ticket got bumped. Just head home, grab a cab. We'll do a girls' weekend in Napa when I get back, I promise." Derek stepped forward, puffing out his chest, trying to project alpha male dominance. "Look, Evelyn, it's just business. This trip is going to secure a $50 million valuation for my company. You wouldn't enjoy it anyway. It's going to be non-stop networking. Just go back to your apartment, you're better off." I looked at the crumpled piece of paper. A fake manifest. They had printed a fake document to hand to the woman who funded the entire operation, expecting me to just nod, turn around, and disappear. They expected the boring data analyst. They expected the scapegoat. "You forgot my ticket," I repeated, my voice devoid of any emotion. It was the same tone I used when executing a hostile corporate takeover. "It was an honest mistake," Brooke pleaded, her eyes darting frantically. "Please don't make a scene, Evie. Marcus is right over there. If you ruin this for Derek, the company goes under." I looked at Derek. I looked at Brooke. I looked at my mother, Eleanor, who was sitting on a leather sofa 50 feet away. actively pretending she didn't see me sipping champagne on my dime. I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I didn't throw my bespoke leather bag, I simply folded the fake manifest, slipped it into my blazer pocket and gave them a smile that was so cold, so terrifyingly hollow, that Derek visibly flinched. "Have a wonderful flight, Brooke," I said softly. I turned around and walked out of the terminal. I didn't look back. I heard Derek exhale a massive sigh of relief behind me, muttering to Brooke, "See, I told you she wouldn't do anything. She always just rolls over." I walked out to the curb, signaled my waiting black car, and slid into the back seat. "Where to, Ms. Vance?" my driver asked. "Back to the penthouse, Thomas," I replied, opening my encrypted laptop. "We have an empire to dismantle." The drive from Teterboro back to Manhattan took 42 minutes. I didn't listen to music, I didn't look out the window, I stared at the faint reflection of my own face in the laptop screen. I wasn't angry. Anger is a volatile, inefficient emotion. It causes you to make mistakes, to act prematurely, to leave loose ends. I felt something entirely different. I felt the absolute, icy clarity of a margin call. My family had taken a leveraged positions against my intelligence, and their account was about to be liquidated. When I arrived at my penthouse, I bypassed the living area entirely and went straight to my home office. It was a sterile, highly secured room dominated by a bank of 6 curved monitors. I poured myself a single espresso, sat in my ergonomic chair, and began the audit. When a quantitative algorithm detects a market inefficiency, it doesn't shout. It executes a series of precise, devastating logic gates. I was about to apply that same methodology to my family's vacation. I opened the dedicated portal for my corporate black card. The interface loaded, displaying the real-time ledger of the escrow account I had funded. The numbers told the exact story my sister had tried to hide. Azura Private Island Resort, $185,000. Initial deposit for 4 villas, transaction 2. Apex Aviation Charters, $180. Gulfstream G6 round trip, transaction 3. Azura Resort upgrades, $45. Premium Overwater Suite upgrade for Marcus Vance, transaction 4. Louis Vuitton Soho, $12. 400. Luggage and resort wear. They hadn't just bumped me from the flight. They had systematically upgraded their own experience using the budget allocated for my presence. Jillian Pratt, the influencer, was currently sitting in a first-class leather seat on a jet I paid for, carrying a $12,000 handbag bought with my money, on her way to a villa I secured. I accessed the aviation charter manifest through a back door my cybersecurity team had established. The Gulfstream was currently at 35,000 feet, somewhere over the Atlantic. They were drinking vintage champagne, laughing about how easily they had handled boring Evelyn, completely oblivious to the fact that they were flying in a metal tube, legally controlled by the woman they had just humiliated. Next, I pulled up the financial dossier on Visionary Dynamics, Derek's tech startup. Remember that private debt holding company I had quietly purchased months ago? It gave me unrestricted legal access to his company's audited financials. It took me less than 15 minutes to find the fatal flaw. Derek wasn't just losing money, he was committing active corporate fraud. He had secured a $50 million bridge loan from a mid-tier commercial bank by falsifying his user acquisition metrics. He had created thousands of bot accounts to artificially inflate his platform's engagement, presenting this fabricated data to Marcus Vance to secure the Series C funding that would theoretically save him. He had bet everything on this trip to the Maldives. He needed Marcus to sign the term sheet while surrounded by the illusion of Derek's massive, unassailable wealth, the wealth that I was currently providing. I leaned back in my chair, sipping my espresso. The fake manifest was sitting on my desk, the creases sharp. I smoothed it out, looking at the poorly photoshopped logo. They thought I was a convenience, a minor obstacle to be managed. It was time to remove the load-bearing pillars of their illusion. I opened a fresh encrypted notepad on my center monitor. I typed 3 lines, 3 actions, 3 precise strikes that would require less than 10 minutes to execute, but would unravel 5 years of their carefully constructed lies. cancel resort booking 2, cancel return jet charter 3. Deactivate corporate cards. At exactly 11 a.m., I picked up the phone, call number 1. The Azura Private Island Resort, corporate concierge desk. Azura Maldives, this is Julian, how may I assist you? The voice was smooth, trained to cater to billionaires. Julian, this is Evelyn Vance. I am the primary cardholder and signatory on the Vance Kessler party reservation, arriving tomorrow morning via private charter. Confirmation number 884 Alpha Tango. I heard the rapid clicking of a keyboard. Yes. Ms. Vance, I see your file here. 4 premium overwater villas. We are eagerly awaiting your party's arrival. Is there something you need to add to the itinerary? I need to cancel the reservation, I said, my voice completely devoid of inflection. Effective immediately. Julian paused, the typing stopped. Ms. Vance, I want to be certain I understand. You are canceling the entire reservation? The party is currently in transit. They are scheduled to land in Mail in 12 hours. I am aware of their trajectory, Julian, I replied. The booking was secured under my corporate account. The guests currently in transit are no longer authorized to utilize those funds. Cancel the villas, cancel the private chef, cancel the yacht excursions, process the refund according to the primary cardholder agreement. Vance, if we cancel the reservation now, when the party arrives on the island, they will have no accommodations. The resort is currently at 98% capacity. They will be stranded. That sounds like a logistical issue for Derek Kessler to manage. I said smoothly. Please confirm the cancellation. Yes, ma'am, processing now. You will receive an email confirmation momentarily. Call number 2, Apex Aviation Charters. I bypassed the general customer service line and dialed the dedicated account manager for high-net-worth corporate clients. Apex Aviation, this is Sarah Evelyn Vance, account number 77 Echo Victor, regarding the Gulfstream currently en route to Mail. Flight designation Apex 44. Good morning, Ms. Vance. Yes, the flight is tracking perfectly on schedule. The catering team reported, the guests are having a wonderful time. That's excellent to hear, I said. I am calling to modify the charter contract. The outbound flight to Mail is paid for and may proceed. However, I am immediately canceling the return charter. Sarah gasped softly. You are canceling the return flight. Ms. Vance, the aircraft is scheduled to remain on standby in Mail for 2 weeks to bring the party back to New York. If we cancel the return leg, we will redirect the jet to a new client in Dubai immediately upon landing. Redirect the jet, I confirmed. The individuals on that flight are no longer authorized to utilize my corporate aviation account for their return transport. They will need to secure their own commercial passage back to the United States. Understood, Ms. Vance, the return leg is cancelled. The jet will depart Mail immediately after disembarking the passengers. Call number 3, my private banking liaison at Chase. Evelyn, a pleasure as always, my banker said, answering on the first ring. What can we do for Apex Quantitative today? I need to immediately freeze and permanently deactivate the supplementary corporate black card, ending in 4419. It was issued to Brooke Kessler. Consider it done. Are there any pending authorizations we need to dispute? Leave the past charges. Just ensure that any future swipe, regardless of the amount or location, is hard declined. Flag the card for unauthorized use. Done. The card is dead, Evelyn. I hung up the phone. It was 11:14 a.m. in 14 minutes, sitting in my quiet, climate-controlled office. Wearing a comfortable cashmere sweater, I had utterly dismantled a $200,000 vacation. When a building collapses, it usually makes a sound. A groan of stressed steel, the crack of concrete, but a financial collapse is silent. It happens in the microscopic space between a server ping and a declined transaction screen. I didn't stop there. The vacation was just the preamble. The main event was Derek's fraudulent company. I compiled the evidence of his falsified user metrics, the bot farms, and the manipulated revenue streams. I attached the documents proving he had used my corporate card to fund a luxury trip disguised as a business expense without my authorization. I drafted an email to Marcus Vance, the venture capitalist currently drinking my champagne at 35,000 feet. I CC'd the chief compliance officer of the commercial bank that held Derek's $50 million bridge loan. I CC'd the SEC's whistleblower division. I scheduled the email to send automatically at exactly 8:00 a.m. Eastern Time the following Monday. Then I closed my laptop. I stood up, walked to my expansive floor-to-ceiling windows, and looked out over the Manhattan skyline. I didn't go home and cry. I didn't drink wine and mourn the sister I never truly had. I packed a different bag of sleek, functional carry-on. I booked a first-class commercial ticket on Swiss Air. If my family was going to have an unforgettable experience in the Maldives, I decided I should treat myself to the crisp, unbothered air of my chalet in Zermatt, Switzerland. I left for the airport 2 hours later, leaving the fake manifest sitting on my desk like a monument to their catastrophic miscalculation. While I was sleeping comfortably in a lie-flat pod over the Atlantic, sipping sparkling water and watching a documentary on particle physics, my family's Gulf Stream was beginning its descent into the Maldives. Here is what happened when they landed, reconstructed from the frantic, hyperventilating voicemails Brooke left on my encrypted server over the next 48 hours. The jet landed at Valana International Airport in Mail. They disembarked, flush with champagne and the arrogance of stolen luxury. Jillian was already recording an Instagram story on the tarmac, twirling in a designer sundress, tagging the Azura Resort. They proceeded to the VIP transfer lounge, expecting the resort's private speedboat to whisk them away to their overwater villas. Instead, they were met by a polite, deeply unyielding resort representative named Tariq. "Mr. Kessler, Mrs. Kessler." Tariq approached them, holding a tablet. "Welcome to the Maldives. I regret to inform you that there has been a complication with your reservation." Derek, still playing the role of the tech billionaire in front of Marcus, puffed out his chest. "A complication? We have 4 premium villas booked. We're VIP guests, just put whatever the issue is on the card on file." "That is precisely the issue, sir," Tariq said, his voice maintaining absolute professional neutrality. "The primary cardholder, Ms. Evelyn Vance, contacted our corporate office yesterday. She has cancelled the entire reservation and revoked authorization for the card on file. Your villas have been reassigned to a waitlisted party." Brooke's face lost all its color. She dropped her Prada tote bag. "What? That's impossible. Evie wouldn't do that. Try the card again." Brooke yanked the supplementary black card from her wallet and shoved it at Tariq. Tariq produced a mobile point-of-sale terminal. He swiped the heavy metal card. The machine beeped. A sharp, angry sound declined Unfacture's use. "The card is dead, Mrs. Kessler," Tariq said smoothly. "If you wish to secure new accommodations, we have 2 standard beach villas available for tonight only. The rate is $4,000 per night, payable immediately via an alternative method." Derek panicked. Marcus was standing right behind him, raising an eyebrow. Jillian had stopped recording her Instagram story. Fine, Derek snapped, pulling out his own personal platinum credit card, a card that I knew had a limit of $50,000 and was already carrying a balance of $42,000. "Just put it on this one." Tariq swiped Derek's card, declined insufficient funds. The illusion shattered in the middle of the VIP lounge. "Derek?" Marcus asked, his voice losing its friendly fraternal warmth. "Is there a problem with your liquidity? I thought Visionary Dynamics just secured a bridge loan." "It's just a bank error, Marcus. A fraud alert from traveling internationally," Derek stammered, sweating profusely, the tropical heat suddenly suffocating him. "Brooke, call your sister. Call Evelyn right now and tell her to fix this glitch." Brooke pulled out her phone. She dialed my number. It went straight to a sterile, automated voicemail. "You have reached Evelyn Vance. I am currently unavailable." Over the next 6 hours, the situation devolved from a minor embarrassment into a spectacular, inescapable nightmare. Without active credit cards, and with Derek's personal accounts completely tapped out, they couldn't afford a single night at the Azura Resort, let alone the premium overwater villas they had promised their guests. They were effectively stranded in the VIP lounge of an international airport, surrounded by expensive luggage they could no longer afford to transport. "We'll just sleep on the jet tonight and figure this out tomorrow," Derek announced, trying to salvage some shred of dignity. "I'll call the charter captain." He dialed the captain of the Gulf Stream. The call went to voicemail. He called the charter company's dispatch. "I'm sorry, Mr. Kessler," the dispatcher informed him. "The primary account holder cancelled the return leg. The aircraft departed mail 30 minutes ago en route to Dubai. You currently have no aviation assets reserved with our company." The jet was gone, the resort was gone, the money was gone. Eleanor, my mother, who had spent the entire flight bragging to Marcus and Jillian about her wealthy, successful son-in-law, suddenly found herself sitting on a hard plastic chair in a public airport terminal, fanning herself with a duty-free magazine. "Brooke, do something," Eleanor hissed, abandoning her aristocratic pretense. "Call your sister, tell her she's ruining my vacation." Brooke called. Again and again and again, 72 times over 2 days. She left 14 voicemails. I listened to them from the balcony of my chalet in Zermatt, watching the sun set over the Matterhorn, sipping a very good, very expensive Pinot Noir. Voicemail 1, day 1 p.m. Evie, pick up. "The resort is saying you cancelled the cards." "This isn't funny, turn them back on." Derek is furious. Voicemail 5, day 1, 8 p.m. "Evelyn, please. Marcus and Jillian are paying for their own hotel in mail. They look at us like we're criminals. Mom is crying. We don't have anywhere to sleep. Just answer the phone." Voicemail 12, day 2 a.m. "Mommy. Evie, please. We slept on the floor of the airport terminal. We don't have money for commercial flights home. The tickets are $3,000 each, please. I'm begging you. I'm sorry about the manifest. It was Derek's idea, please don't do this." She blamed Derek. Typical, when the ship sinks, the rats turn on each other. Marcus and Jillian didn't stick around. Marcus, sensing the massive, radioactive fraud radiating off Derek, immediately distanced himself. He booked a premium suite at a commercial hotel in Mail, using his own funds, and arranged first-class commercial flights back to New York for himself and his wife. He didn't offer to pay for Derek or Brooke. He didn't even say goodbye. He just took an Uber to his hotel, leaving Derek standing on the curb with his fake Rolex and his maxed-out credit cards. Jillian, the influencer, posted a passive-aggressive Instagram story from her commercial hotel room. "When your friends promise you luxury, but deliver a scam. Always trust your gut, ladies." Fake wealth stranded. Brooke and Derek spent 2 nights sleeping on the airport floor. They ate overpriced airport sandwiches paid for, with the remaining $70 of available credit, on Brooke's personal debit card. Eventually, Eleanor had to call her brother, my uncle, and beg him to wire them enough money to buy budget economy tickets back to the United States. They flew home in middle seats, near the bathrooms, on a 30-hour commercial itinerary with 3 layovers. But the physical discomfort was nothing compared to the absolute financial annihilation that awaited Derek when he landed. It was Monday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time. My scheduled email fired perfectly. Marcus Vance landed at JFK, turned on his phone and opened my dossier. He read the irrefutable, algorithmically verified proof that Visionary Dynamics was a complete fabrication. He saw the bot farm data. He saw the manipulated revenue numbers. He realized that the man who had just stranded him in the Maldives was attempting to defraud his venture capital firm out of $50 million. Marcus immediately forwarded the dossier to his legal team, pulling the Series C term sheet permanently. Simultaneously, the chief compliance officer at the commercial bank read the same dossier. When a bank realizes a $50 million bridge loan was secured using fraudulent metrics, they don't send a polite letter. They execute a hostile recall. By the time Derek walked through the front doors of his startup headquarters on Tuesday morning, jet-lagged, unshaven and emotionally destroyed, the federal marshals were already there. The bank had successfully petitioned a federal judge for an emergency injunction. The marshals were confiscating servers, locking down the building, and freezing every single corporate account tied to Visionary Dynamics. Derek's CFO, a man who had been complicit in the fraud, was already cooperating with the authorities. Derek didn't even make it to his corner office. He was escorted out of the building in handcuffs, arrested for wire fraud, bank fraud, and violating federal securities laws. The news broke on financial blogs within hours. Visionary Dynamics CEO arrested in massive fraud scheme. Brooke, who was at home recovering from her 30-hour budget flight, watched her husband's arrest on local television. She didn't call me, she didn't leave a voicemail. The silence was finally complete, but I wasn't finished. There was one final, load-bearing pillar to remove. I contacted my attorney in New York. I instructed him to officially call the private debt I held against Derek's company. Because the company was now in federal receivership, my debt, which I had structured with priority clauses, allowed me to seize the physical assets of the firm. I didn't want his cheap office furniture. I wanted the intellectual property. I acquired the shell of Visionary Dynamics for pennies on the dollar during the liquidation auction. I didn't do it to run his company, I did it to permanently dissolve it. I deleted his branding, sold off the raw code to a tech incubator, and turned his former headquarters into a subsidized co-working space for female-founded startups. And then I sent a formal legal notice to Brooke and Eleanor. I demanded the immediate repayment of the $800,000 I had loaned them over the past 5 years. Every wire transfer, every medical bill, every car lease. I had the documentation, I had the text messages where they acknowledged the funds as loans. Because Derek's assets were seized by the federal government, Brooke had no way to pay. The gaudy mansion in the Hamptons, the one I had provided the down payment for, was foreclosed on by the bank. The luxury cars were repossessed. Eleanor, who had built her entire identity around her daughter's fake wealth, had to sell her own home to cover her portion of the debt and avoid personal bankruptcy. She moved into a small 2-bedroom condo in a notoriously unglamorous suburb. They lost everything, not because I was cruel, but because they had built their entire lives on a foundation of my money, while simultaneously treating me like dirt. I simply stopped providing the foundation. Gravity did the rest. 3 months later, the dust had settled. Derek was denied bail, deemed a flight risk because of the offshore accounts he had attempted to hide his fraudulent funds in. He was facing 20 years in federal prison. Brooke divorced him, not out of moral outrage, but out of self-preservation. She moved in with Eleanor, the golden child and the enabling mother, living together in a cramped condo, forced to actually look at each other without the buffer of my money. The silence of my chalet in Zermatt was absolute, built into the side of a mountain, surrounded by ancient pines and glacial ice. It was the exact inverse of the loud, chaotic, desperate lives my family led. As I sat by the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the snow fall, I thought about the sheer volume of noise they had subjected me to over the years, and how I had finally permanently turned the volume down to 0. My journey to this silence was not accidental, it was engineered. When you grow up as the designated failure in a family of narcissists, you learn to seek refuge in systems that cannot be manipulated by emotion. Mathematics was my sanctuary. A prime number doesn't care if you are wearing the right designer label. A calculus equation doesn't judge you for your social awkwardness. It simply exists, pure and unyielding. I remember the exact moment I realized my family's entire existence was a mathematical fallacy. I was 19, home for winter break from MIT. Eleanor had hosted a lavish Christmas Eve dinner for 40 guests. She had spent the entire week stressing over the menu, berating the caterers, and ensuring Brooke's outfit perfectly matched the dining room decor. When it came time for gifts, Brooke, who was unemployed and finding herself at the time, proudly presented Derek, then just her new boyfriend, with a solid gold Rolex. Eleanor beamed with pride, acting as if Brooke had mined the gold herself, rather than simply charging it to Eleanor's already overextended credit limit. When it was my turn to open a gift from my mother, I unwrapped a generic $10 gift card to a chain coffee shop. "I know you just study all the time, Evelyn," Eleanor said dismissively in front of the entire room. "I figured you could use the caffeine, you don't really do anything else." The room chuckled. Brooke smirked. Derek didn't even look up from admiring his new watch. I didn't say thank you, I didn't cry. I took the gift card, stood up and quietly walked up the stairs to my childhood bedroom. The noise of their fake laughter faded as I closed the door. I sat down at my laptop, accessed the primitive trading interface I had built, And over the next 4 hours, while they drank champagne downstairs, I executed a series of high-frequency arbitrage trades on the Asian markets. By the time the sun came up on Christmas morning, I had turned a $40,000 principal into $1.2 million. I looked at the $10 gift card sitting on my desk. I looked at the seven figures balance on my screen. I realized then that my family was playing a game of Monopoly with fake money, while I was building a central bank. From that day forward, I stopped trying to earn their respect. I stopped looking for their validation. I embraced the persona they had assigned me, the boring, invisible sister, because invisibility is the greatest asset a predator can have. This invisibility allowed me to build Apex Quantitative without a single question from them. When I started hiring MIT graduates and former Wall Street quants, I told my mother I was managing a small team of data entry clerks. When I signed the lease on a 50,000 square foot office space in the financial district, I told Brooke I had a new cubicle. The cognitive dissonance was sometimes staggering. I would spend my mornings negotiating billion-dollar liquidity pools with sovereign wealth funds, and my evenings enduring phone calls from Eleanor complaining that I didn't dress nicely enough to attend Brooke's country club luncheons. "You really should let Brooke take you shopping, Evelyn," Eleanor sighed during one memorable call last year. "You look so drab, people ask me what you do, and I honestly don't even know what to tell them. It's embarrassing. You could at least try to look successful. I am comfortable in my wardrobe." "Mother," I replied, staring at a monitor displaying my personal portfolio, which had just crossed the half-billion mark. "Comfort doesn't get you noticed," she snapped. "Look at Derek, he dresses for the job he wants. He projects wealth, that's why Visionary Dynamics is doing so well." I let the comment slide, primarily because I knew precisely how poorly Visionary Dynamics was doing. Through my proprietary tracking software, I was intimately aware of every desperate financial maneuver Derek executed. I knew about the missed payrolls, I knew about the contractors he stiffed, I knew about the secondary books he kept to hide his insolvency from his board of directors. Derek's entire strategy was based on faking it until you make it. But in the world of high finance, if you fake it long enough, you don't make it, you go to federal prison. I decided to accelerate his journey. The federal raid on Visionary Dynamics was a masterpiece of tactical efficiency. While I was in Switzerland, my legal team in New York kept me updated on a minute-by-minute basis. The FBI and Hedegaze did not knock politely. They breached the glass doors of Derek's Manhattan headquarters at 7 a.m. on Tuesday. Derek was sitting in his corner office, staring at a negative bank balance, trying to figure out how to explain the Maldives disaster to his angry, unpaid staff. According to the affidavits I read later, Derek attempted to grab his laptop and leave through a private executive elevator. He was intercepted by two armed federal agents before the doors could close. "Derek Kessler, you are under arrest for wire fraud, securities fraud, and embezzlement," the lead agent announced, securing his wrists in zip ties. Derek, true to his narcissistic core, attempted to bluster his way out. "Do you know who I am? This is a $50 million company. You're making a massive mistake. Let me call my investors." "Your investors are the ones who called us, Mr. Kessler," the agent replied dryly, referencing the dossier I had forwarded to Marcus Vance. They marched Derek out through the center of the open plan office. The staff, many of whom hadn't been paid in weeks, watched in stunned silence as the visionary CEO was paraded past them in handcuffs, his tailored suit rumpled, his face pale and sweating. His CFO, a man named Robert, didn't even wait for a subpoena. The moment the agents walked in, Robert handed over a flash drive containing the unencrypted, unedited internal ledgers. He flipped on Derek instantly, securing an immunity deal by providing the exact IP logs that proved Derek had fabricated the user metrics to secure the bank loans. By the time Derek was booked into a federal holding cell, his company was already in receivership. The sheer speed of the collapse was what paralyzed Brooke and Eleanor. They were accustomed to problems that could be solved by ignoring them or throwing a tantrum. But you cannot throw a tantrum at a federal indictment. You cannot ignore a foreclosure notice from a major commercial bank. For the first time in their lives, they were facing consequences that could not be manipulated. And the architect of those consequences was the woman they had left standing at a private aviation terminal with a fake piece of paper. The silence from my family lasted for exactly 3 weeks following Derek's arrest. They were too paralyzed by the sudden absolute collapse of their reality to even attempt to contact me. They were dealing with federal lawyers, asset freezes, and the terrifying realization that their social standing had evaporated overnight. But eventually, desperation overrides pride. It was a Thursday afternoon. I was sitting on the terrace of my Swiss chalet, reviewing a complex algorithmic model for a new commodities fund, when my encrypted personal phone rang. It was Brooke. I let it ring 5 times before I answered. Evelyn? Brooke's voice was a fragile, high-pitched whisper. It lacked all the performative confidence she usually wielded. Evie, are you there? I am here, Brooke, I replied, my voice perfectly calm, devoid of any emotional resonance. Evie, everything is gone, she sobbed, the sound wet and raw over the international connection. Derek is in jail. The feds took the house, they took the cars, they even froze my personal checking account. Mom had to put her condo on the market because the bank called the collateral loan she signed for Derek last year. We have nothing. She paused, waiting for the predictable response. The response she had been conditioned to expect for 36 years. She expected me to gasp, to offer sympathy, to immediately offer a wire transfer to tide them over. I took a slow sip of my Pinot Noir. I looked at the snow-capped peak of the Matterhorn. I said nothing, Evie, Brooke prompted, her voice rising in panic. Did you hear me? We're ruined, we need help. I know you don't have much, but whatever you have in savings. Maybe you could take out a loan? Just to pay for a defense attorney for Derek. They're talking about 20 years, Evie. 20 years. The sheer audacity of the request was almost poetic. She was still attempting to use me as a financial buffer, even while assuming I was a low-level data clerk. I heard you, Brooke, I said smoothly, and I understand the severity of the situation. However, I am not in a position to provide any financial assistance. In fact, I am the one who initiated the legal proceedings to reclaim the $800,000 I have lent you over the past 5 years. The line went dead silent, the kind of silence that occurs when a fundamental law of physics is suddenly reversed. What? Brooke gasped, her brain struggling to process the information. What are you talking about? The demand letter, that was from some corporate holding company. Apex Holdings, that's not you. Apex Holdings is a subsidiary of Apex Quantitative, the hedge fund I founded and operate as CEO. I explained, the words falling like perfectly weighted stones. I own the debt on Derek's startup. I provided the dossier to the SEC. I canceled the Gulfstream. I canceled the Azura resort reservation, and I deactivated the corporate black card you attempted to use to pay for Gillian Pratt's $12,000 Louis Vuitton handbag in Soho. Brooke stopped crying, her breathing became shallow, rapid, the realization was physically hitting her, dismantling every assumption she had ever held about her invisible younger sister. You did this? She stammered, terror replacing the sorrow. But you're just a data entry clerk. You drive a 5-year-old Volvo. The Volvo is an excellent vehicle. I said mildly, it gets 30 miles to the gallon. It is also a very effective camouflage. It allowed me to observe the exact mechanics of your greed without interference. You planned this, Brooke whispered, the horror creeping into her voice. You knew Derek was going to fail. You let us go to the airport. You let us get on that plane to the Maldives. I did not let you do anything, Brooke, I corrected, my tone sharpening into a blade of cold logic. I provided you with a $400,000 vacation. You chose to remove my name from the manifest. You chose to print a fake document to humiliate me at the terminal. You chose to prioritize an influencer and a venture capitalist over your own sister, using my money to do it. It was Derek's idea, she shrieked, reverting to her default defense mechanism. He printed the fake manifest. He told me you wouldn't care. He said you'd just go home and be fine, because you don't care about luxury. Derek did not swipe the corporate card in Soho, I replied. Derek did not call me to ask for the initial funding under the guise of a family bonding experience. You did, you were complicit in every single transaction, you simply lacked the intelligence to realize who was actually holding the ledger. I paused, letting the silence stretch out, forcing her to sit in the absolute ruin of her own making. Mom is going to lose her house, Brooke sobbed, a final desperate attempt to weaponize guilt. She used it as collateral for a loan Derek took out 3 years ago. The holding company, your holding company, is foreclosing on it. Are you really going to put your own mother on the street? Eleanor made a calculated financial risk to support a fraudulent enterprise because she valued the illusion of wealth more than basic due diligence. I stated, "The market is simply correcting the inefficiency. She will not be on the street, she will simply be in a significantly smaller apartment, living within her actual means. It will be a character-building experience for her." "You're a monster," Brooke spat, her voice trembling with impotent rage. "You're a cold, unfeeling monster. You've been sitting there hoarding millions of dollars while we struggled." "You could have saved us years ago." "I could have," I agreed calmly, "but a rescue requires a victim who actually wants to learn how to swim. You just wanted someone else to drown in your place." "I refused the role, I'll tell everyone." Brooke threatened, her logic completely unspooling. "I'll go to the press, I'll tell them the CEO of Apex Quantitative destroyed her own family out of spite." I actually laughed, a short, quiet sound that echoed off the glass walls of my chalet. "Go to the press, Brooke," I encouraged her softly. "Tell them exactly how you and your husband attempted to defraud a federal bank. Tell them how you utilized stolen funds to host a luxury networking event in the Indian Ocean. Provide them with the fake manifest you handed me at Teterboro Airport. I'm sure the financial journalists will find the narrative absolutely fascinating." The SEC investigators certainly did. She choked on a sob. She knew she had no leverage. She had no money, no social standing, and no defense against the mountain of documented evidence I possessed. She was entirely, completely trapped by the consequences of her own actions. "What do you want from me, Evie?" she asked, her voice finally breaking, completely defeated. "Do you want an apology? Do you want me to beg?" "I'm begging, please, just stop the foreclosures." "I don't want an apology, Brooke," I said, looking out at the mountains. "An apology implies a desire for reconciliation. I have no desire to reconcile with parasites. I want absolutely nothing from you. That is why I am calling the debts. Once the liquidations are complete, our ledger will be balanced at zero. And we will never speak again." I hung up the phone. I didn't block her number immediately. I took the phone, walked out onto the snowy terrace, and dropped it into the roaring fire pit I had lit earlier that evening. I watched the plastic melt and the lithium battery flare up in a bright, brief flash of green light. The connection was permanently severed. They could not reach me. They could not manipulate me. The silence was finally entirely mine. The psychological toll of being the family scapegoat is profound. It conditions you to believe that your worth is intrinsically tied to your utility. If you are not fixing a problem, funding a crisis, or absorbing the blame, you have no value. My family had expertly exploited that conditioning for 3 decades. They used my quiet nature as a canvas to paint their own insecurities upon. They called me boring because they lacked the capacity to understand depth. They called me cheap because they were terrified of anyone who wasn't enslaved by the need to consume. But when you treat a highly analytical mind like a doormat, you fail to realize that the doormat is counting your footsteps, analyzing your gait, and calculating exactly how much weight it will take to break your ankles. Eleanor's foreclosure proceeded without interruption. The bank seized her sprawling, antique-filled colonial home and auctioned it off to cover the defaulted loan. She was forced to sell her collection of designer porcelain and her vintage jewelry just to afford the first month's rent on a small, aggressively mediocre apartment in a strip mall suburb. Brooke moved in with her, without Derek's fraudulent income, and with her own reputation entirely toxic within her social circle. She could not secure employment at any of the high-end boutique PR firms she previously frequented. The last piece of intelligence my security team gathered on them, before I permanently terminated the surveillance, indicated that Brooke had taken a job as an assistant manager at a mid-tier retail clothing store. She was spending her days folding the exact brands she used to mock me for wearing, while Eleanor sat in her cramped apartment, desperately trying to maintain the illusion of old money to neighbors who simply did not care. I didn't celebrate their downfall. A true algorithmic trader does not celebrate a successful short position. They simply review the data, confirm the hypothesis, and move on to the next market inefficiency. Their destruction wasn't a triumph, it was simply the inevitable mathematical conclusion of their own hubris. Once the foreclosure documents were finalized and the liquidation of Visionary Dynamics was complete, I instructed my legal team to sever all contact. I changed my personal phone number. I wiped my digital footprint from any public registry that Brooke or Eleanor might theoretically access. I became a ghost to them. My life, however, became significantly louder, though only on my own terms. With the toxic, draining presence of my family permanently excised, the cognitive bandwidth I had previously dedicated to managing their manufactured crises was suddenly freed up. I poured that energy entirely into Apex Quantitative. We launched a new division focused on ethical AI integration in emerging markets, a project that generated an additional $2 billion in assets under management within the first 6 months. I stopped dressing in the muted, invisible beige suits I had worn to deflect my mother's criticism. I began curating a wardrobe of bespoke, minimalist tailoring, sharp, uncompromising silhouettes constructed from the finest vicuña wool and Italian silk. I didn't dress to be noticed by the society matrons Eleanor idolized. I dressed for the absolute, unyielding power of the boardroom. 6 months after the Maldives incident, I found myself sitting on a different balcony. This one was in Kyoto, overlooking a tranquil Zen garden at a centuries-old ryokan. I had rented the entire property for a week of uninterrupted solitude following a particularly aggressive and successful corporate acquisition in the Asian tech sector. The sliding paper doors were open to the cool, crisp morning air. I held a cup of matcha green tea, the ceramic warm against my palms. I looked out at the carefully raked gravel, the ancient stones, the precise, intentional placement of every single leaf. It was a stark contrast to the frantic, performative desperation of the life Brooke and Derek had lived. They had spent their entire existence chasing an illusion. They believed that wealth was something you projected outward, the logo on a handbag, the lease on a sports car, the VIP status at an island resort. They were fundamentally hollow, vibrating with the constant terror of being discovered as frauds. True wealth is silent. True wealth is the ability to sit on a balcony in Kyoto, completely unreachable, knowing that the foundation beneath you is solid steel, poured and cured by your own hands. There is a specific kind of liberation that comes from finally walking away from the people who were supposed to protect you, but who chose to exploit you instead. Society conditions women, particularly daughters and younger sisters, to be the emotional shock absorbers for their families. We are taught that it is our duty to maintain the peace, to fund the emergencies, to swallow the insults, and to smile while our own resources are siphoned away to fuel the egos of those who contribute nothing. We are told that family is an unbreakable bond, but a bond that only operates as a one-way extraction valve is not a bond. It is a parasite. If you are watching this and you recognize the pattern, if you are the quiet one, the responsible one, the one who is constantly told you are boring, simply because you refuse to participate in their chaotic theater, listen to me carefully. Your silence is not a weakness, it is a strategic advantage. While they are shouting to convince the world they are important, use the quiet to build your empire. Educate yourself, hoard your resources, learn the mechanics of whatever system you are in, whether it is high finance, corporate law, or simply the psychological dynamics of your own household. Build your foundation deep in the earth, far below where they can see it. And when the day comes, when they finally push too far, when they attempt to humiliate you, isolate you, or extract the last ounce of your dignity, do not scream. Do not cry, do not beg them to see your worth, Simply execute the algorithm, remove the load-bearing pillars of their illusion, cancel the funding, call the debts, freeze the accounts, let gravity do the work, and as the structure they built on your back collapses into dust, turn around and walk away. Do not look back at the rubble, do not offer a hand to pull them from the wreckage. Step into the black car, open your laptop, and begin the next chapter of your life. My name is Evelyn Vance. I am the CEO of an $800 million empire. My family tried to leave me standing on the tarmac, clutching a fake boarding pass, expecting me to go home and cry. Instead, I liquidated their entire existence. Thank you for listening to my story. Share this with the woman in your life who needs a reminder of her own power. Leave a comment below if you have ever had to walk away from a toxic foundation. Subscribe to the channel, and always remember, the loudest person in the room is usually the weakest. And the quietest person is usually holding the detonator. Walk away and never ever look back.